NFL draft mailbag section. Before we do, have you secured any sponsorships with your name, image, or likeness yet? No. What's keeping you from earning money or gaining products today? Probably access to companies. Maverick Sports Consulting can connect those dots for you. We believe in the power of athletes making a living off of their own likeness while going to college. If it's simply that you don't have access to companies, don't let that keep you from being successful. Contact us at mavericksportsconsulting.com so we can help you navigate your path to gaining corporate sponsorships for your collegiate career. An athlete's earning potential is unlimited. Why wait until tomorrow to start earning today? It doesn't matter what sport you play. We help all our clients achieve their goals. Just contact us at Maverick Sports Consulting. Tick-tock, the clock is ticking. So we're moving into the mailbag section. Unfortunately, David Turner is not with us tonight. Therefore, I get the free reign to talk some 2022 NFL draft. So I had a mailbag that I put out on Twitter at Rise and Draft a couple days ago. I got a lot of questions back. So I want to roll through a few of these questions and try to answer as much as I can about the 2022 NFL draft. So I started out Mark Roberts at Aggie_Mark asked, you were higher on Tyree Johnson than most preseason, and he's really put it together this year. Selfishly wish he'd come back, but have no idea where he's graded. Can he get to day 2? So Tyree Johnson, of course, being the defensive end, outside linebacker, stand-up rusher from Texas A&M, right around 6'2.5", 235 pounds in the spring with 33-inch arms. For me, I agree, Mark, I was definitely a lot higher on Tyree Johnson than most. And I will say the reason for this is when I'm evaluating pass rushers, specifically guys that are working off of the edge, I am looking for some of those unteachables when you're talking about the speed and the bend to the position. There are guys that win in completely different ways. There's guys that know how to reduce angles and use their power profile and use their speed to power. And if that is your game, that is fantastic. But for me, when I watch a guy like Tyree Johnson, he has, for me, some rare ability to corner and really reduce his angle and to be able to flip his hips and be able to have bend in his ankles and knees. So I was a big fan of him because I think there's some unteachables. And when you add in the ability to have those unteachables move into coaching at the NFL level that is just flat out better than college, then we're talking about something potentially special. So I am very high on Tyree Johnson. NFL-wise, he was somewhere in the early day 3 to mid day 3 range. So I would say 4th to 5th round is probably where the NFL values him right now. But I think Tyree Johnson, if he continues to go on a tear that he has for Texas A&M right now, he's leading the team in sacks and among the nation's leaders. If he ends the year on a high note and then he gets into bowl season and he tests well, I think there's a day 2 possibility. I think the 3rd round is very possible. I think some will look at him and say like he's a smaller stand-up rusher. So for some defense, he might not fit perfectly into their scheme. But I really do think that he has day 2 potential for teams that value that type of edge presence, that type of speed. So Tyree Johnson, definitely day 2 possibility, end of day 2, but I think more firmly 4th to 5th round grades across the NFL for a guy like Tyree Johnson. Next question we had, Sean Cummings asked, and that is cat _daddy asked, which positions do you think will have more round 1 selections if either running back or linebacker? So do I think there's going to be more linebackers or I think there's going to be more running backs? That's actually a great question because both classes are a little thin, especially at top. I think when we're talking running backs, there's a couple guys that I think have the possibility of going in that range. Breece Hall from Iowa State, who has some weird haters on Twitter, to be honest with you. I think he has the possibility to go in the end of the 1st round, early 2nd. I think Kyron Williams from Notre Dame has the possibility to go in a similar range for many different reasons. We saw a couple years ago, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, although probably shouldn't have been, was the first running back off the board and was the lone 1st round selection 2 seasons ago in the 2020 NFL draft. And he went over guys like Jonathan Taylor, who has that size profile. He went over guys like DeAndre Swift, who's a bigger player than him. J.K. Dobbins, who has more of that traditional size, 215, 220 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire went on top because he had what was perceived to be a more all-around game than the other running backs in the class. So when you're looking at this draft, I have been predicting this, and I still am on this for now. I think Kyren Williams from Notre Dame has a chance to be the first running back off the board. Not necessarily because I think he's the best runner of the group, but because when you add in the ability he has as a tough physical runner that breaks a lot of tackles, always finishes forward with his hands that he has being a former wide receiver in high school for a large portion of his high school career, and the blocking he has, this is a potential 3-down back because I think that he has that type of profile. So I think there's one running back that may go in the first round. Is it Breece Hall? Is it Kyren Williams? I think it's probably going to be Kyren Williams, but we'll see. Isaiah Spiller is going to be in the conversation. Everyone wants to make Kenneth Walker from Michigan State into that conversation. I don't personally think that Kenneth Walker is going to be in the first round conversation, but he's a guy that people have been talking about. So could he? We'll see. I'm not 100% sure. But at the end of the day, I think there's only a possibility of one running back sneaking into the first round. Linebackers, on the other hand, I think there's a couple guys that have great seasons that have an opportunity to go in that range. One being Nakobe Dean from Georgia, who, if you liked Nick Bolton last year, and I did, then you're really going to like Nakobe Dean. I feel like I did like him a lot during the summer. I honestly do think that Nick Bolton's a better football player, but Nakobe might be more highly valued because he kind of does fit what is very wanted in the NFL from the second level defender today. He has really nice instincts in zone, and he has some nice quickness, nice explosiveness. So I think that he's a guy that may has a chance to go in the first round. The other guy is Devin Lloyd from Utah, who's if we're talking 10 years ago, he's the traditional Sam backer who can play on ball a little bit, can play out in space when we're going to more of a spread look. Like, he has kind of that versatility to him. And I think that he's had a really good season for the Utes. So those are the two guys that I think have the possibility. Ultimately, I think it's a push. And I know that's kind of boring for some people because they want an answer to that. But I think at the end of the day, we have one linebacker in the first round. We have one running back in the first round. I don't see two linebackers in the first round. I definitely don't see two running backs in the first round. I think it's a push. If you ask me who's more likely to not have a player in the first round out of the two positions, I'd probably say running back, honestly, because I think that one of those linebackers does have a decent chance to go in the first round. So maybe one of the running backs doesn't sneak into the first round, but ultimately I do think it's probably a push for me in terms of the running back versus linebacker first round conversation for next season. Next question we had was from Jack Beach, All-American season at 4K Trey with 4Ys. As has Damone Clark worked his way to draftable for LSU? Absolutely, yes. In the summer, I was not a fan. So much so, I will say that I watched a game of his and I stopped watching. I put him on the back burner because I'm like, I don't think this guy is worth a preseason grade right now. Like, I don't think it is. I didn't think that he was a guy that impressed me enough to think next level linebacker, draftable range. He is absolutely draftable. And for what I'm hearing, he could go earlier than expected. Third or fourth round could be a possibility for a guy like Damone Clark because he has had a fantastic season. He's been better in coverage, and he's been fantastic against the run this year. Like, let's just call it what it is. And he's always had the physical profile. He has a big body. He's physically well built, has some speed to him. Just hadn't put it together. So Damone Clark, I think, is absolutely draftable now. The question is how high. Third to fourth round, I think, is very possible for Damone Clark. I'm not fully sold into him because it's still a one-year wonder type of situation, but he's done really well. So give Damone his credit. He's had a great season for LSU. I think he's tied for the nation lead in total tackles with 108 right now. So had a really good season. Tyler Ward asks top 5 deep threats in this year's class. Okay, so I'm pulling up the wide receiver list just so I can have some guys that I would consider deep threats on here. Jamison Williams is the first guy from Alabama. I mean, without even looking at any list, would be the guy that I would point to. I mean, he's a legitimate 4-3 guy from Alabama, and he is. I think the thing that's really impressive is early on in the season, you're like, okay, cool, man. Like, you can stretch the defense. You've been fantastic working vertically, and you've been kind of that home run threat that, Jalen Waddle was and Henry Ruggs was before that. And now we have a guy that is affecting all levels of the field in Jamison Williams. This isn't just a guy now that's just affecting vertically. Like, I'm seeing him make plays all over the field. So he would be the top guy if you're asking just pure deep threat would be a guy that I would look to. I wouldn't really pencil in Anaya Smith. It's like, so this is the thing. Garrett Wilson can threaten vertically. Traylon Burks can threaten vertically. Anaya Smith from Texas A&M can threaten vertically, but I don't consider them true like deep threats because I think that they're going to be used in roles that are going to kind of use them in some yak situations, to create their chunk plays, not necessarily on the deep third of the field. I think Traylon could definitely do it. So if you want to classify him as a deep threat, that's fine. But I'm looking for guys that I think are like first and foremost vertical stretch kind of guys. I think of Chris Olave from Ohio State. I'm not a big Chris Olave fan, to be honest with you, and I'm still not. I wasn't in the summer. But if we're talking about a guy that is just a departmentalized supplementary piece as a vertical guy, I think that he's going to test relatively well. I would say he's going to run 4.4 low. 4.4 low. I think 4.41-ish, 4.43-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. And he's got silkiness to him. He's a good ball tracker down the field. I feel like he is a nice vertical threat in that ballpark. Zay Flowers to a degree. I also think though that he's more of like what I'm talking about. Like you're going to try to get him in. You're going to try to get him the ball quickly a lot too, though. Like he's not a guy that I just consider just a deep threat. I think probably the biggest guy. I didn't have him up on my list, but a guy that I think is pretty solely that is Reggie Roberson Jr. from SMU. Now, he's a guy that's been dealing with injuries, but he's another guy that might be a legitimate 4.3 guy. Like, he is that type of dude. The question is, and has always been the question now over the last 2 years for Reggie, is health. And he's been kind of supplanted by Danny Gray as the number one receiver now for SMU. So I don't know what the outlook's looking like on him, but I will say he is absolutely, in my opinion, a guy that, if he's healthy, can definitely stretch the field, and that'll be his main calling card at the next level, at least early on. Romeo Doubs is a guy from Nevada, a little bit of a longer athletic guy, but he tracks the football extremely well. I wish the hands would be a little more consistent, but I think that he is definitely a guy that can test the length of the field. And then the last guy I'll kind of throw out there is Calvin Austin III from Memphis. He's a smaller guy, listed at 5'8.5", 162 pounds, so he's very tiny, but he's a legit 4.4 kid that really works the vertical level of the field very well. So, excuse me, definitely a guy for me that is going to have that role early in the NFL. Maybe he won't be a high-volume getter, but I think that he's a guy that will definitely garner a role as a deep threat. I then had Pouncey 2.0 at Steel_Curtain_ ask, where do you think the Steelers go with their first round pick? I think they're in a tough situation, to be honest. Because I do think that at some point you need to figure out what is the quarterback situation. Ben is, I think he's out. I think he announced that he was out. But if not, man, like he is struggling. Like they need to get a guy in that building. Unfortunately, I don't know if there's going to be a guy in that range. Like I love the Carson Strong fit in Pittsburgh because I think that he really fits what they want to do. They've kind of changed philosophically what they usually like to do, working the vertical portions of the field. But I think that he is definitely a guy that would do well in Pittsburgh if the ownership and the coaching and kind of the philosophy stays what they traditionally like to do in Pittsburgh, and that is play in a vertical-based offense. I think that Carson Strong would be a good fit. But I think that they are at a point right now where, like, it's great to get your quarterback, but, like, I still think offensive line is such a massive need. Like, Okorafor at left tackle is just not good right now. They've had, Zach Banner at right tackle who's had injuries off and on, and is Kevin Dotson the long-term guy at guard? And it looks like they might have their future center in Kendrick Green, but like, I don't know, man. Like there's holes all over that offensive line. So I almost feel like they need to take care of the offensive line more than quarterback, which is going to put you in a tough situation because like, what's the quarterback going to look like? And I understand it's not assumed great quarterback class at the top. So like maybe you can try to find a gamble on a guy in day two. I mean, that's always a tough gamble because at the end of the day, quarterbacks are going to go early. Like it's going to happen. EJ Manuel went top 15. I think people always say like in that class, like, oh, a quarterback didn't go to 15, but it's such an important position that EJ Manuel literally went top 15. So it's always going to be a conversation, I think, for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year specifically. Like, what is the future of the quarterback position? But I think that their hand is forced They need to fix this offensive line. They absolutely need to. Like, it is a top priority, in my opinion. So it needs to happen. I think that is the main concern. If I was a supporter of the Steelers, is getting that offensive line in some type of fix. So, like, who are we talking about? Guys like Kenyon Green, Charles Cross. I think Kenyon Green, the ability to play multiple positions, like the Steelers have holes in a couple different spots. So having a guy like that, maybe a Darian Kennard, maybe if you trade back a little bit, like I think that could be a potential guy. I think that Ike Mekwonu could be a guy that could potentially play a couple different spots. I like him better inside a guard, but if you're looking for your true left tackle, guy like Charles Cross makes a ton of sense. I think Sean Ryan from UCLA makes a ton of sense. If you get into the range where you can draft Evan Neal, I think that makes a ton of sense because if he's not a true left tackle at the next level, he's a right tackle. He's played at a guard. He gives you some alignment versatility, some positional flexibility. So, guy definitely to take a look at there. I had Chuck and Dots at Chuck McBride 21 asked thoughts on Aqeel Glass, that is the quarterback out of Alabama A&M. So I do work for College Gridiron Showcase, which I would tell you Aqeel Glass was the first guy that I wanted to invite from the quarterback. Now we're talking about guys for the College Gridiron Showcase that are more day 3, 4 through 7 into the UBFA range. But I really like Aqeel's opportunity to stick at the next level as a backup quarterback because he is a guy that is listed 6'3" and 7/8", verified this spring, 228 pounds, has played a ton of football, man. Like he's a 3-year heavy starter, including the COVID year. And he's had a ton of reps. He has gotten better and better each and every season for Alabama A&M. So I am a big Aqeel Glass guy for a guy that is going to stick at the next level. Do I think he's going to be a starter? Probably not. But I do think that he's a guy that's going to make you feel happy about your backup quarterback option because I think that he has a strong arm. I think that he is I think he's very comfortable in his own skin. I think sometimes quarterbacks get out of their comfort zone and they don't play their game. I think Aqeel Glass's game is very easy to understand. He's a cerebral kid who understands from pre-snap to post-snap and making adjustments on the fly, and he is comfortable running his offense, and he just never seems to panic, which I really respect in Aqeel Glass. So I think that he has an opportunity to stick. I had Steven at Viking King 888 ask, what round do you see Jared Patterson getting drafted? I still think there's a chance to get drafted in the late first round. I think it's possible because Jared Patterson has been very good for 3 years. Now starting at center, he's got size to him at 6'4.5", 310 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark. He's a guy that, for me, is one of the better pass blocking centers to come out in a few years. I compare him to Alex Mack. Like, I think that's what he is. Is he the greatest people mover in the run game? No, but I think in his zone-heavy scheme, he can get away with it. And I think that he has a profile, a frame that can put on a substantial amount of weight and can get to that point. So I do really like Jared Patterson. I think safe, I would say he's a early day 2 pick. I would say that he's a second rounder. But don't be surprised if he goes late first because, again, the pedigree matters. 3-year starter at Notre Dame. You've played a lot of snaps. You're a center, which is obviously a very important position outside of the tackles, the most important position on the offensive line. So I think Jared Patterson still has a chance to be a top 50 pick. I really do, even though and it's funny because, the state of the offensive line in Notre Dame right now is bad. But if you watch the film, Jared Patterson's been pretty good. He's been a good football player for Notre Dame this year, and he's actually had probably a better year than he did in 2020. It's just the fact of like the parts around him are not as great. So early on in the season, he was pressing a little bit. He was trying to make up for guys' mistakes. Right now, he's doing his job and he's playing good football. So I'm a big fan of Jared Patterson. I think he's got a shot. Next question. We have a house divided at Vikes and Pack asks, what are your thoughts on David Bell? Wide receiver, of course, from Purdue. David Bell, for me, 6'2", 205 listing. There's zero chance he is 6'2". I would say he's probably 6'1", maybe. Like, he might be 6 foot and 5/8. Like, I think that's probably more of his ballpark number. The things I love about David Bell, he's very crafty. He understands how to uncover latent reps. He tracks the football exceptionally well, and he has outstanding body control and hands through contact. And down the field, he does some phenomenal things, some really exciting things, honestly. My problem is I don't think he's a dynamic athlete. I don't think he's super flexible. I think he's going to struggle to create create consistent separation. He's a guy for me that I think is a secondary option. There is an outside chance that he develops eventually into a guy like a Robert Woods. And I think that that's a very slim chance because I think that there are some similarities to him, to Robert Woods coming out of USC. Like I see some similarities there, but I honestly think that Robert Woods is just a little better of an athlete than him. So I think that it was a little more translatable to say like, hey, eventually he could be a better route runner. It could be there. I think David Bell is what he is, but what he is, I think, is a good football player. And so I think that he's a guy that's going to be a 50 to 60 catch a year guy, a 700 to 850, 900 receiver. Like, I don't think he's a 1,000-yard consistent guy. Like, I don't see that, but I think what he does is admirable. And I think what he does can be a big part of an offense if used correctly. So, like David Bell, I just think that some people need to kind of waver the expectations there because I think he's a good football player. Definitely has a compartmentalized role, but I don't know if he is quite the separator enough for me to say like high volume getter at the next level. I don't know if I personally see that. Joel Mann at Joel's Man. Nice. Asks, what are some receiver prospects you could see rising up draft boards? I think I hit on one earlier. Like, I mean, if you ask me who's the biggest riser of the wide receiver group so far, it's easily Jamison Williams. Like the guy went from a guy that could barely get on the field for Ohio State and was going to be the fourth receiver this year with how talented that room is, to a first-round pick. Some people think he'd be the first guy taken. I wouldn't doubt it because I just think that he has unteachables that, like, NFL teams are going to value. Like, why did Henry Ruggs go before Jerry Jeudy? Because he's fast, because he has the speed element. That's just always going to work to their favor. So I think that he has that unteachable trait that a lot of teams are really going to like. Another guy that I feel has risen already to this degree and will continue is Wan'Dale Robinson from Kentucky. Now I will, and point blank period on this one, I am not in on Will Levis, a quarterback. I'm not. He is just way too inaccurate for my liking. He's a first-year player, so like, hey, go back to school. Maybe I changed my opinion, but like for the people that are hyping him up to somewhat in this quarterback class, give me a break, man. Like, give me a break. He is just way too inconsistent. Who is consistent, though, is Wan'Dale Robinson from Kentucky. His wide receiver, man. He is good. He's very good. Of course, he's a Nebraska transfer. Was kind of used more as a gadget player at Nebraska, kind of a hybrid running back, wide receiver. And he could do those running back things because he is sturdy built. He's physical. I think some people are going to try to bring the Kadarius Toney kind of conversation to him. And he does play a little bit like Kadarius. So, like, I respect it. What he's developed as a receiver a ton this year, man. Like, working all levels of the field, working from the slot. But, like, I've seen him outside, too, as winning a bunch down the field. Like, I really like Wan'Dale, and he's a yak guy at worst at the next level and gets some of those gadget things. So I like Wan'Dale. Let's just leave it at that. How much I will kind of, show as the podcast does move on and the draft process does move on. So want to thank everybody. This was fun. Working through some of the mailbags. We'll have David back next week to hopefully continue to talk 2022 NFL draft. Like I said, David doesn't like to stray into the 2022 talk this early into the season, but I thank you all for joining me today on Mav Sports Take episode 64. We'll be back same time, same place next week. If you give me a like, a share, a subscription, a review, we would really appreciate on any podcast platform that you can imagine. Thank you all so much. Hope everybody has a great week. We'll see you next week, Tuesday, 8:30 Eastern time. Everybody have a great one.